The desert evening stretched wide and endless, painted in copper and violet as the sun bent low against the horizon. A breeze swept over the land, carrying the scent of mesquite smoke and wild sage. In that stillness, Clara Whitmore stood rigid beside her father's wagon, her hands trembling as she smoothed the folds of her faded calico dress. She had come west with her family in search of land, in search of a new beginning after loss back in Missouri. The journey had been long and brutal, but nothing in her upbringing had prepared her for this moment, when an Apache warrior stood before her, his shadow long across the dirt, his eyes blazing with something she could neither name nor ignore. "You must marry me," he said, his voice deep and steady, though edged with heat. "Tribal law commands it." The words struck her like a lash. Clara's breath caught in her chest as she stared at him. His name was Dakota, friend to all, her father had once explained, though his gaze and stance told a different story now. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his copper skin glowing in the last light of day, long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. His presence was both unsettling and magnetic, and his eyes, those eyes burned with fierce longing, as if the entire weight of tradition and desire lived in them. Her father, Henry Whitmore, shifted uneasily, his weathered hands tightening on his cane. He had tried to respect the tribes since settling here, trading fair, offering water and supplies when he could. He'd told Clara once that Dakota was a man of honor, a man who carried both fierceness and gentleness in equal measure. But the law Dakota spoke of was not one Henry had expected to touch his daughter. I don't understand," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "Why me?" Dakota stepped closer, though not menacingly. His movements were deliberate, calm, but charged with urgency beneath the surface. "Because my people saw the sign. When you tended the wounded child last winter, when you walked into our circle unafraid, the elders said the spirits marked you. A woman who gives without fear, who binds wounds with her own cloth, is chosen. And when the chosen is revealed, there is no refusal. She must join with the one appointed." Clara's mind reeled. She remembered that night clearly, the storm, the freezing air, the boy bleeding from a fall, her hands steady as she pressed cloth against his wound. She had acted without thought, only instinct, only compassion. She had not known she was stepping into the weave of a prophecy. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "But I don't love you." Dakota flinched, but only slightly. He drew himself taller. "Love can come after. What matters is the bond. The law is not about your wants or mine, it is about the survival of my people. To deny it is to dishonor the spirits and risk their wrath." Her father cleared his throat. "Here, my daughter's not some prize to be handed off because of a vision. She has a choice." Dakota's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the knife at his belt, not as a threat, but as if the weight of it grounded him. "Choice is a thing of your world. In mine, we live by what is decreed. If the law is broken, both our families suffer. Both our people pay the price." The desert night deepened, stars flickering awake overhead. Clara felt trapped, as if the earth beneath her had shifted into chains. She looked into Dakota's eyes, searching for cruelty, but saw instead a fierce honesty. He was not playing a game. This was his truth, his command, his longing. Her father's grip tightened on her arm as if to steady her. "We'll not be bullied," he said, though his voice lacked strength. Henry had been growing weaker with each passing month since the sickness took Clara's mother. His cane was not just for balance now but for survival. The thought of leaving him, of being torn from his side, sent panic crashing over Clara. Dakota saw the fear in her eyes, and something shifted in his expression. His voice softened, though it still carried the weight of authority. "I do not wish to take you as if you were a thing to be stolen. But law is law, the spirits chose, and I cannot walk away from what was decreed long before either of us drew breath." Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. She wanted to scream, to run, to say no. Yet a strange pull held her in place, as if the land itself had bound her feet. The Apache warrior before her was not only a man, he was a vessel for something larger, something ancient and unyielding. The silence stretched on, broken only by the chirring of crickets and the low howl of a distant coyote. Her father's eyes searched hers, full of worry and helplessness. "Clara," he murmured, "don't you listen to this. You're my daughter. You'll decide your own life." But Clara knew in her bones that her decision was not simple. To say no might mean conflict with the tribe, might mean angering a people whose respect they had fought to earn. And if what Dakota said about the spirits was true, would she be responsible for whatever curses followed? Dakota's voice broke the silence again, low and resonant. You saved a life that was not your own. That bound you to us. You think the spirits forget such a gift? They remember everything. They demand balance. Clara pressed a trembling hand to her chest, her pulse racing. She thought of the boy's frightened eyes, the way his small hand had clutched hers as she worked to stop the bleeding. She had whispered words of comfort, not knowing he didn't even speak her tongue. That act of mercy, born from instinct and humanity, now echoed back to her as destiny. Her father's cane tapped against the dirt as he shifted forward, trying to stand taller than his bent frame allowed. You speak of spirits, boy, but she's flesh and blood. She's got dreams of her own, and I won't see them stripped away by superstition. Dakota turned his gaze to Henry, his jaw hardening again. Your world is built on choice. Ours is built on obedience. Neither is greater, but they cannot both rule the same path. If she turns away not only from me, but from all that binds earth and sky. And such a turning does not come without a cost. Clara's chest heaved as she tried to breathe. Her father was right, she wasn't a prize, wasn't a promise etched into stone. But Dakota's conviction carved into her like a blade. His words were not threats. They were truth, spoken with the weight of generations behind them. The stars above seemed sharper that night, cutting into the sky with a brilliance that left her feeling small and fragile. Clara looked at Dakota once more, and in his gaze, she did not see a captor. She saw a man burdened by a law he had not written, a man whose fierce longing was tethered to something greater than himself. And though fear knotted in her stomach, though her heart rebelled, something deep within her stirred, an ember that refused to die. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. The Apache camp sat just beyond the riverbed, their fires visible in the dark like distant stars fallen to earth. Clara lay awake at night in her small cot, listening to the desert wind whistle through cracks in the cabin walls. The shadows seemed to whisper Dakota's words back to her, a reminder she couldn't shake, you must marry me. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, not cruel but resolute, eyes holding the weight of something older than either of them. By daylight, she tried to busy herself, grinding cornmeal, mending her father's shirts, fetching water from the well, but nothing eased the weight pressing on her chest. Every task, every breath, felt shadowed by the inevitability of the decision she had to make. Henry kept mostly to his bed, his strength fading with each passing day, though he still muttered about not letting superstition rule their lives. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe her choices were hers alone. Yet when she looked toward the river and saw the faint smoke curling into the sky from the Apache camp, her heart thudded in a rhythm she couldn't explain. One morning, as dawn spilled across the land, she found Dakota waiting near the edge of the fields. He stood with the patience of a man who could wait forever but would not yield. His horse grazed nearby, its hide gleaming bronze in the sunlight, while Dakota himself was still and steady, like a tree rooted deep in the earth. Clara froze, the pail of water heavy in her hands. She had hoped to avoid him, to push this decision further into the shadows, but his presence cut through all pretense. I don't want this, she blurted out before he could speak. Her voice shook, but her words came sharp. I didn't ask for it. My life should be my own. Dakota studied her quietly, his gaze sharp but not unkind. For a long moment, he said nothing, and then he nodded once. And yet you saved a life. The spirits saw you. Do you think gifts are given without cost? Tears stung her eyes as she set down the pail. I saved that boy because he needed help, not because I wanted to be claimed like cattle. Her voice broke, trembling between anger and despair. For the first time, Dakota's expression cracked. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a raw honesty she had not heard before. Do you think I do not feel the weight of this? That I take you without care? I was a boy when the law was first spoken over me. The elders told me my bride would come from the white world, that I would know her by her courage. I laughed at them then. I did not want it either. The words struck her harder than she expected. Her breath caught as she searched his face, realizing he too was trapped, bound by the cords of a tradition older than them both. His longing wasn't only desire, it was duty tangled with something deeper, something painful. Her voice softened, though her throat still tightened. Then why don't you just refuse? Dakota's eyes hardened, though not with anger. Because to refuse is to bring famine. To break the bond is to curse both our people. Do you think I would risk the lives of children, the health of the old, just to spare myself? Clara turned her face away, staring at the horizon where the sun blazed brighter. His words tangled with her thoughts, heavy as stones. She wanted to call them nonsense, but there was a conviction in him that made denial feel hollow. That night, Clara sat by the cabin window, her hands wrapped around her knees. Her father dozed nearby, muttering in his sleep. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the ache of confusion. Was it possible that destiny had woven her into Dakota's life without her consent? Could something as wild and ancient as tribal law dictate the shape of her heart? She remembered her mother's words, spoken long ago on quiet nights. Sometimes, Clara, the things we fear most are the very things that shape us into who we are meant to be. The days turned into weeks. Dakota did not press her again, though his presence was constant. He came to repair the fence when storms broke it, to leave food by their door when her father's strength waned, to watch silently from a distance as if waiting for her to see what he already knew. Clara told herself she despised him for it, for lingering like a hawk watching its prey, but each act of care chipped away at her anger. His fierce longing was not the hunger of a man seeking to own, but the devotion of one who bore the weight of generations. She began to notice the small things, the way he knelt to speak gently with children who gathered near him, the way he touched the earth before mounting his horse, the way he carried silence like a prayer rather than a threat. He was fierce, yes, but his fierceness was not cruelty, it was faith. One evening, Clara walked down to the river to wash clothes. The air was cool, the water biting against her fingers. She looked up and found Dakota standing on the opposite bank, his silhouette etched against the burning sky. He did not move, did not speak, but the quiet between them felt louder than words. Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to shout across the river, to demand he let her go, but instead she lowered her gaze, her throat too thick with unspoken truths. The moment of choice came quietly, almost without warning. A week later, as the sun bled into the horizon and shadows stretched long across the land, Clara felt her feet moving before her mind caught up. She crossed the dry riverbed, each step heavy but certain, her heart thundering like hooves in her chest. The Apache camp was alive with the glow of firelight, voices rising in song that floated on the desert air. The elders rose as she entered, their lined faces solemn but kind. Dakota stood at the center, his gaze fixed on her as though the world itself had stilled. The firelight flickered across his features, catching in his dark eyes that held both desperation and hope. Clara's breath came fast, her palms damp with sweat. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and run, yet something deeper, something quieter, urged her forward. Her voice trembled but carried strength as she spoke. I will not be forced. But, if I choose, let it be because I see you, not just the law, not just the spirits. You. The silence that followed was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. Dakota's breath caught, and in that moment, the fierce longing in his eyes softened into something gentler, something almost breaking. He bowed his head slightly, as though humbled. Then you choose me. Clara swallowed hard, tears burning her lashes. Her whole body felt weak, yet lighter than it had in weeks. Yes, I choose you. The camp exhaled as one, the elders murmuring blessings. Dakota stepped forward, his hand brushing hers, not claiming, not binding, but offering. And for the first time since that night by the wagon, Clara felt not captured, but free. In his eyes, she saw not a captor, not a stranger, but a man whose longing had transformed into devotion, and whose faith had become something she could no longer deny. And though fear still lingered in the corners of her heart, she understood now that this was not a cage. It was a path she would walk by choice, not by command.